Hello and welcome to the Happy Hour Hustle podcast with our host, Kim Bodie.
I am absolutely thrilled to be chatting with you.
Principal and fearless leader of 834 Integrated Communication. On this podcast, you're going to learn a lot about a lot, like public relations, marketing, digital, and advertising.
That's a nice way of putting it.
Forgive us if you hear some dogs in the background. We are obsessed with them, and there is a medium-sized pack at the office at all times.
Fantastic.
So grab a glass of wine, preferably one with ice in it, and learn a little something today. Listeners, I'm so excited today. We have Dr. Dominique Pritchett with us. She will be speaking at Inforum this week, and we are just blessed to be in your presence, must I say, Dr. Dominique. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
We can't wait. And obviously, as I said, Inforum is this week where you'll be the keynote speaker. So we are just going to give you listeners a little sneak peek into what you could learn or hear about on Thursday. So Dr. Dominique, if we want to kick it off and you just tell us a bit about yourself, your background, all of that fun, basic info.
Well, hello, everyone. As announced, my name is Dr. Dominique Pritchett. I come to you all the way. I'm actually your neighbor in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and I do live near the beautiful Lake Michigan. So by trade, I'm a licensed therapist, I'm a speaker, I'm a mental wellness strategist, and yes, I am the mother to a 5.5-pound Yorkie named Moomba.
Importantly, must I add, we needed that detail.
Very important. So at the Capstone Dinner, I will be speaking on the topic of burnout prevention and even recovery, because we recognize that many of us are on different stages of our wellness journey. Some folks say, I'm just so tired. Some folks say I'm stressed, and some folks say I am burnt out. And burnout is the state of mental and physical exhaustion that is unresolved or that's unmanaged. Okay. So it's very important for you to hear, where am I falling on that state of stress, that spectrum of stress? And so by trade, I am a licensed therapist, and I work with so many individuals who are just so exhausted. You think of what we just went through with the pandemic and so many hot topic issues around the world. Some of us feel like we can't catch our breath. And that is why I hold the topic of burnout so near and dear to me, because I believe if we are not well, how can we serve and show up in our best light to help the people we love and we need to care about?
Agreed. Wow. I think, tell us a little bit about how you got into the topic of burnout, because I feel like, yes, it's very, you could say like a buzzword nowadays. Like you said, with COVID, I feel like it's very prevalent. So what exactly about it, or a personal experience, or what kind of honed you into this topic?
Right. I've experienced burnout, experienced it and nearly experienced it several times in my career. You know, growing up, one of 7 children, big family, y'all, big family. I'm the second oldest girl. So I had a lot of responsibility. I was a parentified child, and that's actually what my doctoral dissertation is on, the topic of parentification. And that is basically when a child has their childhood stolen and their response for being the caretaker, the best friend, the provider for adults in the home, as well as other children. And so recognizing that I missed many parts of my life due to being the caretaker for other people. When I went into the corporate world, I was the first, the few, or probably the only Black woman in many of the spaces I went to. So I burnt out from the concept of code switching or identity switching, where I was just tired to even just show up to be myself. So nearly experiencing it and actually experiencing it, I realized that I was operating in a state that didn't feel good to me. I was cynical, like, oh yeah, we about to go to this job and they just go work us to death. Like, it was just unpleasant for me to be myself or try to be myself. So I was cynical, I was unmotivated. And then so many people was like, well, you're really depressed. Well, yes, I'm depressed too, but also I'm so exhausted that I don't even care. I didn't even care at times. So the topic of burnout is personal to me, but also my private practice's Beloved Wellness Center and it's 100% virtual, based in Kenosha, Wisconsin. I recognize 1, women, 2, Black women, and we can keep going down a line of our unique features. We are not held to the same excuse me, we face different challenges than many other people. And to actually just show up and be yourself, that's a privilege. And many of us are not awarded that privilege. And so I recognize this is a pervasive thing that's impeding and embedded within my community as a Black woman. And so I look forward to teaching women how to reclaim their stories, rewrite their trauma narratives so that they can live a life with ease and not perfection.
Mm-hmm. And why is it that women experience burnout more? You kind of touched on it, our different expectations, kind of the pressure, I think both society and also we put on ourselves. But what exactly, I'm sure there isn't one reason, there's probably many, but why do we see it in women much more commonly than men?
I know it lends to we're caretakers. We are just natural born caretakers. And when we look at society's expectation of us to take care of everything, when we look at how our homes are structured, how we show up at work, well, let's default things to a woman because she'll take good care of it. I always say certain folks get a pass for half a doing things, and women, we're expected to go above and beyond, even to just match the standard of someone's mediocrity.
Isn't that the truth?
And so being that in that caretaker role, knowing that we have to work twice as hard, remember, we share many unique features. Yes, we're women. And then when we start breaking it down into the cultural uniqueness of how we have to show up in the world, it looks differently, it feels differently. And so therefore, we are measuring ourselves up to someone's standards. And I don't believe, yes, women, I don't believe we're still respected in the workplace, in corporate. And sometimes, even if you walk in as a CEO, folks will think you are the janitor. And no shade to that profession, because my grandmother and my mother were housekeepers for my whole life.
Mm-hmm. Walking into a room and being perceived one way. Exactly.
Exactly. So at the Inforum dinner, I'm going to share a journey of me experiencing burnout and when I really started to make my breakthroughs. And my breakthroughs came when I learned to take control of my voice. And this is why I love being a speaker. For so often, or for most of my childhood, I was taught to be seen and not heard from a spiritual lens, but also don't make too much noise. You know, I was always a smarty pants, so I learned not to ask why. I found myself buried in books as a coping skill, and I escaped through books. But at the dinner, I'm going to take you on that journey with me of what that was like for me growing up, because I know my story is going to resonate with so many of you. Then we're going to take those tangible things we can do and apply them within 24 hours if you put your mind to it.
Wow. Okay, I'm ready for that. So I don't want to spoil the Inforum program because if you're listening, you're going to want to be there, obviously. So can you give us maybe just a tip or two, or just like a little sneak peek, just something?
Mm-hmm. I'm going to give you my 3 A's. And remember, like you said, you need to be in the house. First, you need to have an awareness of where you are on that state of stress and burnout. And remember, it's on a spectrum. Think about the different times that's happening in your life. Think about everything that's on your plate. If we're not aware, we're operating in the dark. And so as you become aware, you get to assess, okay, well, what's really happening with my body? What's showing up for me? What would I need to get back to a more stable or grounded version of myself and still show up and do what I need to do? So we have to acknowledge, I want you to assess, and then we get to activate what makes the most sense for us to move from balance. You will hear me say it then, you will hear me say it across many platforms. Balance is so basic. I invite you to release that. We have to start operating in the notion of harmony, because think about it. I'm coming to Michigan. It's like the music state. And so when we think about harmony, everything's not perfect, but when we find a good rhythm, oh, that song sounds really good. And so acknowledge, assess, and activate what you need to put in place to get to a healthier version of yourself.
Wow. I'm going to sing that. Oh,
yes.
So good. I'm honestly, I will be so real with you. Personally, I feel like I'm in a phase where what you're saying is resonating with me. And I think so many other, that's the point, is it does resonate with so many, but we're afraid to say it. and it's difficult and it's hard to be vulnerable. So listeners, this is your sign.
Yep. That's very true. One of my favorite quotes by Toni Morrison states, if you look at the world as a brutal game, because keep in mind, many of us, going back to those unique things that apply to us as women, we're taught to play the game, but many of us were never told the rules. And so our burnout comes from piecemealing what it means to show up. And so Toni Morrison said, if you look at the world as a brutal game, then you'll bump into the mystery of a tree-shaped scar. There seems to be such a thing as grace, such a thing as beauty, such a thing as harmony, all of which are wholly free and available to us. And that last part is we have to take the onus and responsibility to figure out what makes sense and what do I value. Because a lot of times we're showing up, nobody told us to code switch. Nobody told us to take work home, or no one told us that we're working virtually. Nobody said you can't walk the dog around the block. We have to take responsibility in the part that's in our control and start putting the pieces back together. But some of those pieces, it's okay that they stay off.
Wow. I'm honestly speechless, but what you have me thinking, I guess, because it's, I think, easy to say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. But what's just something every day that you do to maintain, or I guess, try to maintain that harmony?
Yeah. I call it my miracle morning. And I'm going to tell you what I do and what I don't do, because a lot of times our breakthrough, which is part of my keynote, our breakthrough is in not doing things. We're taught, oh, if I keep doing things, will get better. Well, what is it that we need to stop doing? Who do we need to stop talking to? That brings in the conversation of boundaries. And so what I don't do is I don't check messages. I don't check emails. My phone is on do not disturb from 9 to 9. Okay. So I don't do those things because I know if someone's calling me with something heavy, I'm going to be activated all night and I'm going to bring that into my day. So I don't do that anymore. But what I do in the morning, and I'm shooting for about 5 out of 7 days, and I call it my miracle morning. I start my day with prayer. I'm a woman of faith. Meditation. I believe prayer is us talking to our higher power, and meditation is us, letting it resonate. I journal and I do some type of physical exercise. It's taken me 38 years to know that it's the best way to start my morning. And it came with a lot of trial and a lot of errors. And I call it my miracle morning, because if I don't show up well on the other side of this computer screen for my clients, I'm hurting them in return.
Wow. Yeah, I think. And that there is making it actionable, right? Giving someone something to like that is how you start to implement ridding burnout of your life. And obviously, well, not burnout, but they're always going to run into challenges like that. But just knowing that there are things, actionable things that you can do. Yeah.
And another thing, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it, right? Don't therapy, y'all. Here's the thing. Many of us have been taught, oh, if we talk about our stuff, we're weak. We still hear that message at this day and age. Here's the thing. The strongest people go to therapy, because the strongest people are building up that emotional endurance, because life is a marathon. It is no longer a sprint. I'm a former sprinter. And so finding a way to get alternative perspective, but sitting in front of someone who don't know you, that is part of my wellness plan as well. My therapist, she gets a mouthful every few weeks, okay? I would not be a good therapist if I didn't have my own therapy. And that is part of my coping strategy. And as a mental wellness strategies for corporations and companies, I realize many of them don't have crisis plans. And the same thing happens to us individually and personally. We don't have a crisis prevention plan, which puts the cherry on top of when we get to burnout. We have no clue what our resources are.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm like, what's my crisis plan? I don't know.
Okay. And when I see you on Thursday, we're going to have a chit chat about that. Not a therapy session, but you got a few days to think about it. But it makes really good sense of part of that prevention is I like to think not having a plan ain't a plan.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to face these hard moments in life. Many of us will face burnout more times than we want to admit, but I rather know my resources, my support systems, and where I can go in the event. In the in-between time, I'm working on mental wellness strategies, self-care, boundaries, assertiveness. For women, some people get awards for being assertive. We often get chastised. So how do you find a savvy sense of assertiveness where you don't have to ask permission to speak?
Do you have the answer for us? Please tell me you do.
Come to the keynote. I got some things I want to share with y'all.
I love it. Oh,
So,
thank you for all of that. Listeners, I'm sure you're hooked because I am. I'm not going to keep Dr. Dominique for too much longer because she has things to do and she has a keynote to deliver to us in just a couple days. So I suppose I'll ask one last question. What are you most excited about for Inforum's Capstone Dinner?
anytime I can be in a place with women who have a high energy, who recognize that through sisterhood, we can do this thing called life. And I've done a lot of research. I've connected with so many people within your organization and surrounding organizations, and they speak highly of you all. And that tells me you're operating with integrity, intention, and you are really pushing yourself to make an impact in this world. I'm excited just to be in the room, to experience the energy, because Michigan ain't that far from me, and I look forward to coming back.
Did you hear that? She's coming back. Yay!
Yes.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom. And I'm sure there's much more to be shared as well. We'll see you at Inforum Capstone, listeners, and you better be there too. Thanks, Dr. Dominique.
Thank you.